Thank you so much for listening to Breadwinning Mums. We really appreciate your continued support over the last year, and we're happy to announce that we have published the Breadwinning Mums book. Yay! This book is based on the conversations from the Breadwinning Mums Season 1 episodes. It highlights the candid journeys of each mums, as well as a golden nugget of wisdom from their life's lessons. Now is the perfect time to give the gift of the Breadwinning Mums book to the special mums in your life or to yourself. No matter where you are in life, I'm sure the practical tips within the Breadwinning Mums book will help you take your lives just a little bit further. Limited copies available, so order yours now at breadwinningmums.com. That's breadwinningmums.com. Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
Your mental health is not your fault. Your mother's mental health is not your fault. Your father's mental health is not your fault. The way that you behave is you're a product of all of these things that have come together. And it's not bad. There's nothing wrong with you. And there's plenty of time for you to sort it out.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that it's okay to be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today we're chatting with Alex Egeler, an aerospace engineer turned lead parent to his 4 boys when an opportunity presented itself. Alex is the founder of Empathetic Egg, where he helps parents realign their career choices with their family-centric values. He opened up about his life story, about growing up as an only child with high expectations to succeed in his career, losing his dad at the tender age of 11, and how his battle with his own mental health challenges empower Alex to further help his own son through his mental health journey. Here we go with Alex Egeler. Hello, Alex.
Hi,
How are you?
good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. So excited for this chat. I obviously saw your post on LinkedIn, and something about that post really caught my attention. But before we go into that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I am a dad of 4 boys. I live in Northern California in the US. And my first career was an aerospace engineer. I did that for about 20 years at 2 companies. And during the pandemic, the company that I worked for went out of business sort of in a flash. And my family was kind of struggling. So I had an older boy who was going back out into elementary school. I had one who'd never really been to elementary school. And then I had twin 2-year-olds who'd lived in the house with a nanny for the entirety of the pandemic. So we
Yeah.
knew it was going to be a little bit of a rocky reintroduction. And so I decided to take some time off to kind of be the lead parent for a bit, and eventually decided that that was kind of what our life needed. And so I started a coaching business focused on helping parents in various ways.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the brief summary.
Mhm.
I want to go back to the very young Alex. So I know that you currently live in North California.
Yep.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, so other side, East Coast of the
Yep.
US. Um, I was an only child. I had two very loving parents. We had a sort of from the outside picture perfect family situation. But on the inside, it was actually not that at all.
Mm.
Um, I was very spoiled as a kid. I got everything I wanted. I really didn't have any struggles or problems. And then kind of things took a hard turn when I was 11 years old. My father actually took his own life, and he had been struggling with depression for, in fact, probably about 30 years at that point. And it was all new to me. I didn't know anything about it. Nobody had really told me what was going on. So
Mm.
it was a big shock to the system when that happened, and that kind of threw the childhood that I was living into turmoil.
Yeah, it shattered the childhood utopia as you knew it back then. What
Yeah.
did your parents do?
My dad had actually started his own business.
Hmm.
So to get kind of the full picture, you have to go another step back in the generation. So my grandfather is the classic American success story. He was the first one to go to college in the family. He went to work in the mailroom at a major corporation, eventually worked his way up to literally being considered for the CEO of one of the three biggest corporations in the country at the time,
Wow.
um, and made a huge amount of money, but made really big sacrifices for that success.
Hmm.
And my dad was an only child, and
Hmm.
one of those sacrifices was my grandfather traveled the world for his job. So he lived in Brazil for a few years, he lived in Europe for a number of years,
Hmm.
and kind of my dad just stayed in the United States. He went to boarding school starting, I think, when he was maybe 12 or 13 years old,
Wow.
and would see his parents at Christmas, and then a little bit he'd usually go live with them over the summer, but was kind of pretty separated from them.
Yeah.
And um
So
but
your grandma
had
lived with your grandpa
yes, yeah, my
overseas.
grand
Yeah.
yep, yeah, they
Okay.
traveled together, and my dad
Yeah.
was kind of left to his own devices.
Yeah.
And so my father saw kind of the model of parenting of super success in his career, but
Yeah.
really kind of at all costs,
Yeah.
no thought to, well, what does this do?
Yeah.
So my dad went and started his own business. It was very successful. He did quite well at that.
Mm.
And then it kind of stopped going well. And I think one of the sort of things around the timing of his ending his life was it was an easy excuse because the business wasn't doing well, and he had so much of his own identity wrapped up in, I need to be successful at work, that's who I am, that's kind of my job.
Mm.
And that was certainly kind of the story that permeated outward. It wasn't that that was what caused it, but it was maybe that was what kind of triggered it at that moment.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the model that I had. I had a grandfather who was ultra successful. I had a dad who was successful and then not and then gone.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the message. And my grandfather actually explicitly said to me, the model is the first generation generates the wealth. The
Mm.
second generation sees how hard they worked to cause that, and the third generation are the ones who lose it. And he looked at
Yeah.
me and said, "You're not going to do that, right?" And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." So it was I was an only child, and so all of the pressure of that was
Yeah.
focused on me, right? You're going to be successful too. You're going to be able to
Yeah.
carry on this family legacy of success at work.
Yeah.
And that was, when I look back at my childhood, I think the main message that really, certainly my grandfather was trying to send me, and that my dad was also, I don't know if he was trying to, but was sending, was work is very important and you have to do a good job.
Mm.
And that it made a big impression on me, as you might imagine.
Yeah. So was it a hard thing for you to push back against your pop pop-ups to say that that's probably not the value that I want to carry through my generation and
Well,
beyond?
I didn't question it at all until long, long, long after.
Mm.
I really took that as, okay, that's
Mm.
what we do. That's how we handle this. And I think in a lot of ways it served me well. I mean, I did very well at my career, but I would also say that even early on, I had an inkling that, you know, I don't really know that I need to be the best. I don't know that I need to be the top of the pyramid. Um, but that I want to do well. I want to be successful. I certainly need to support my family. Those were kind of the messages I think that stuck.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks, Alex, for
Mhm.
sharing. That's very
Mhm.
brave of you. So going back to the young Alex, you grew up with this kind of values, kind of mentality of having to pursue excellence. What led you to aero engineering?
Yeah, so it really, I wish it was better thought out, actually. I really liked math and physics. Those were kind of the things that I was particularly good at in school. And I had always liked airplanes. I read books about airplanes. I went to air shows. I
Mm.
even got a pilot's license when I
Oh,
was,
cool.
still in high school. I learned how to fly a plane, and
Wow.
um, I I kind of joke that the main message I got from that was flying planes is cool, but it's not for me. It was very stressful, and I there were kind of got through it, and I passed the test, and I was like, okay, that's
That's it.
good. I don't need to do that anymore. Um,
What
so I
was it
decided,
about? What was it about flying that wasn't for you?
it was really the process of taking off and landing and talking to air traffic control. It was just very, very stressful for me. I mean,
Okay.
I'm generally a little bit of an introvert. Sometimes it doesn't show, but I really am.
Yeah.
And, it was a lot for me to kind of feel like it was life or death and have to talk to this and say exactly the right thing and do it exactly the right time. And like I said, I got through it, and then I kind of said, well, flying planes is good, but maybe I should just go design them instead. So that was kind of what I focused on at school, was mechanical engineering and then aerospace engineering, and didn't really question it. Kind of followed that path and
Mm,
got a job, and I worked at a big corporation for about 10 years doing that, and really thought it was just fine.
mm. Okay, perfect. What about being a dad? Did you know from early on that you wanted to have a family and have kids, if not a kid?
Yeah, I think that probably came up a little later. I don't think I put a lot of thought into it kind of growing up, but
Yeah,
certainly once I got out, into college, into the world, I started to realize that I kind of wished I'd had a bigger family.
yeah,
And I think I'm one of those people, I kind of built a family. I have really close friends from all different phases of my life, and I really enjoy spending time with them and kind of keeping in touch with them. And it just kind of seemed like this relationship part of life is better, is, that's the important thing to me, and having a family is sort of the ultimate version of that. So I don't think I really set out to, oh yes, I'm definitely going to have a family, but I think I sort of saw that the relationships were important, and then saw that that was really a path to kind of building a life around that.
yeah. Okay, perfect. And so you were working as an aero slash astro engineer for a while before you transitioned into fatherhood and now a
Mhm.
career coach. Are you able to share us some lessons learned as both a professional but also as a parent as you were navigating early parenthood slash professional journey?
Yeah. So I had a very big aha moment. I can actually remember it kind of explicitly. I went on paternity leave from this big aerospace corporation, and it just so happened that that wasn't actually a very common thing for people to do. They had to offer it, at least unpaid, and it happened that the generation of people who worked there were all mostly 10, 15, 20 years older. And I was
Mm,
kind of the new crop of people who'd come in younger.
yeah.
They just kind of started hiring younger after literally hiring nobody for a decade.
Mm,
And so we were kind of a shift. And I was one of the first people in sort of the group that happened to have kids. And I said, oh, I'm going to go out on paternity leave. And I got a lot of sort of curious looks from the older men
yeah.
who definitely didn't do that and had never met anybody who had it. So, well, why? What are you going to do? And I said, well, my wife,
Yeah.
this is the US, so she got about 14 weeks of leave.
Yeah.
And then, so I stayed with her for about 2 weeks at the beginning. And then I went back to work
Mm,
exhausted.
mm.
And then after about 3 months, I went on leave and took care of our son for about 10 weeks. And then we went into daycare. So that
Yeah,
way,
you
it
tag
was a little
team.
bit,
Yeah.
yeah, right. But it was a
Yeah.
little bit longer, right? We keep him out of daycare a little bit until he was
Yeah.
about 6 months old.
Yeah.
And um, I'd maybe held one baby in my life before I was handed my son in the hospital. So I'm not, had no sort of
Yeah.
experience with this. And my
Yeah.
wife said she handed me our son, to go off to work on her first day of work. And she said, I looked terrified. I was, just very nervous. And she says when she returned, went to work that week, came home, handed me the baby in the morning, did that. And she said by the time she came home at the end of that week, I was a dad and that I
Ah,
wasn't scared anymore.
yeah,
I wasn't like, what am I going to do? That I'd kind of, I'd
yeah.
been tossed into the pool and I had to figure out how to swim. So,
Yeah,
and I that's how it felt to me too. I remember that first week just being kind of on edge and really
yeah.
kind of by the first month being like, okay, I got this. And I went back to work and I kind of thought, okay, this job is perfect. It has very rigid boundaries. You show up at this time, you leave at this time. You can't take a computer home because it's part of the defense. And so, there's no remote anything, really clear boundaries. So I thought this is, perfect job for kind of being a dad.
Mm.
And I went back and after 2 days, I sat in a meeting and I thought, this is a complete waste of my time. And nobody had done any of the work that I was kind of my work while I was gone. They just let it sit. And it made me realize, if this can sit for 3 months, can
Mm,
it just sit forever? Right. And
mm,
I had this sort of moment where I thought to myself, if I'm going to spend 8, 9 hours away from my son every day, I
mm.
have to be making an impact. It has to matter. I have to care about it. And this
Yeah.
job is not it, even though on paper it looks like pays a good salary, has clear boundaries, gives me all this time off, all these benefits. And I said, this isn't actually what I want, though. This isn't the right answer. And
Mm,
it just so happened that a friend of mine had just gone to go work at a startup, and he kind of said, you should come work here. And I said, well, I don't, that's not me. Like I'm not a risk taker. I'm not, fast paced. And he said, I just talked to somebody. And
mm,
the experience was we're all dads here, actually. Everybody
mm,
in the group has kids, and most of them are under 5. And we work from home. Kids are homesick. We work. We don't have any expectations that you're gonna, be here every day. We know what life is like. They said it's
mm,
really fast paced and you have to work hard, but we kind of get the flexibility of needing to be a parent. And I was like, wow, actually, that is the right fit for me. So I kind of went against the grain completely for what I expected of what the right job for me was. And
mm,
it was exactly the right move. And I felt the impact. The work that I did mattered because there wasn't a whole team of people. It was just me doing it. And if I wasn't there, it didn't get done. And people noticed. And that
mm,
mattered to me now all of a sudden.
mm,
So that was a big shift. And it kind of set off a series of decisions where things that I had said, well, that won't work for me as a parent. Now, as a parent, I said, actually, that is what I need. So I had always thought, I don't want to be a manager, too much pressure. I don't really like, the idea of having to oversee people. And I decided actually maybe that is what I want because the part of the job that I'm good at is talking to people, mentoring, coaching, planning. And that's really kind of what you have to do. So I became a manager. And even though it was more stressful, it used the things that were my skills a little bit better
mm,
and made the job actually easier to do. And so again, it was another step where I did something that wasn't what I predicted, but it was the right thing and it made my job easier.
yeah.
And then as I mentioned, kind of the next step was the company went out of business. I was very, very sad about that. But it became clear that the right thing was not to take another job. I had people saying, Alex, you just tell us what job you want. We have
Mm,
connections. This was a very sort of high-powered company in the aerospace
mm,
industries. We were very well known. I had a lot of name recognition, a lot of connections. And I
mm,
just had to say, right now, I'm just going to be a dad.
mm.
And that was really difficult for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. How many years have you worked in the startup until it was gone under?
So I worked there for 9 years, which some
9
would
years.
question the
Wow.
definition of startup. But
Yeah.
in aerospace, it takes a long time to build planes. So we were still a startup that whole time.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So 2 decades of working until you decided that my family needs me.
Hmm.
Um, it's really funny that you mentioned it was an interesting progression because I have 2 kids, 6 and 8, boy and then girl. When I first had my firstborn, the interesting shift that I felt was a shift in identity because I was no longer the professional that was working. I suddenly become what? And I wasn't sure what I was. Did you
Hmm.
go through the same journey and how were you able to go through that?
Yeah, I think it happened little by little through kind of the first part of parenthood. I think definitely leaving the first job was around my identity of I I need to be something more. I'm not just sort of showing
Mm.
up and collecting a paycheck. I need to have there needs to be more to
Your
life than
purpose.
this. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that was an identity sort of journey, but I
Shift.
didn't
Yeah.
recognize it at the time.
Yeah.
And then again, sort of deciding to try to progress in my career, it was, again, there was an identity piece to it too. It's okay to kind of lean into these things. And I think there was a big part of me that had been very scared of doing that just because of the experience of seeing my grandfather and my dad and each of them leaning into their careers and then, in my opinion, sort of having very negative
Yeah.
repercussions of that.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, it's okay to do both. I can do this and I can do it my way. I don't have to do it their way.
Yeah.
The real shift, though, came when I did step back and
Yeah.
decide to be, essentially a stay-at-home dad,
Mm.
that there was really a big void that opened up. And I had that moment of, well, what am I?
Yeah.
And I think the way that it manifested, the way that it really became clear to me that this was something that was needed sort of investigation and consideration and reflection
Reflection.
was
Yeah.
the question that killed me was when people would say, so what do you do? And
Yeah.
I would be unable to answer that question because I would like just saying I'm a dad, it felt in my body like, no, you're not. And so for a long time, I answered, oh, I used to be an aerospace executive. Like
Yeah.
that was important, like I had to prove myself to this random stranger of, no,
Yeah.
no, no, I have worth because I've had a good job. It's okay.
Yeah.
And the more I kind of pulled on that, I thought, why do you say that? That's not, you're a dad right now because that's the most important thing for you to do. Why can't you say that out loud?
Yeah.
Um, and that really took a lot of work. And there's, another sort of moment in the journey was me discussing it with my very, very wise wife. And she said, what do you think this is about? And I said, well, I just feel like I'm letting my dad and my grandfather down. They
Mm.
they
Mm.
laid out this path, and sort of my grandfather explicitly saying, you're not going to blow this, that if I'm not successful in my career, I'm really sort of not living up to the potential that they set up for me and that they made big sacrifices for me to have. And
Yeah.
so both of them have passed away at this point. My wife never met either of them. But she said, well, the way this works is they're gone. So you get to tell whatever story you
Mhm.
need to tell. And she said, there's two versions of the way you can think about this. You can either think that wherever they are fixed with, the same personality and ideas as the moment they died. And in
Mm.
that case, you're probably right. They're probably looking down going, why in the world is he doing this? We don't get it. She said, or you can imagine that wherever they are, however the afterlife works, they are still watching and they're still learning. And they're looking down at you and you're saying, I need to be here for my family. It's okay if my career takes a hit. And they are high-fiving each other and saying, thank goodness he's the first one in the family to figure this out while he could still do something about it. And she said, it's really your choice. You get to pick whatever story you want because they're not here to tell you. And
Yeah.
she said, so which one of those would you pick? And I said, well, if I pick the one where they're high-fiving, it feels a lot better. And she said, yeah, well, you don't know that that's not what's happened. And I said, no, that's true. And that really kind of clicked in my brain. I mean, she knows me very well. That's why we're married. But it really unlocked that idea of, how would I know if I'm letting them down? They're gone, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
there's no foregone conclusion about that. And so that's really just me projecting it on myself. And why don't I just project something different? And that opened up the idea of, what do I want for my sons, right? I don't want them to feel, oh my goodness, I have this loving family and I'm doing the right thing for sacrificing, and I feel terrible about it because my dad says I'm supposed to be X job. No, I want them to feel free to do whatever they want to do to live the life they want. And if that's career success, great. And if that's a family and staying home with them, great. So
Yeah.
why can't I just model that myself?
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like you're a very lucky guy, Alex. You made the
Yes,
right
very,
choice with that
very,
wife of
very
yours.
lucky. Yes.
One thing that I spoke with other guests in the podcast over and again is the opportunity that you have, but also the privilege that you have as a parent. I believe that parenthood gives you an opportunity to fix a few important things that you felt was lacking or was mishandled in your own childhood. And I
Mhm.
think based on what you've just shared, this was the one thing that you are trying to get right for your boys, right? So it's so inspiring to hear you being able to reframe your own mindset, saying that, yes, I am going to do this right, but not foregoing all of the valuable things that they have, that your dad and your granddad have taught you, but also making sure that it also takes into consideration the importance of your family in your lives, not putting them on the wayside whilst you're looking for professional accomplishments. So good on you. And thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, no, and I think you've hit the nail right on the head with that, which is that it really is a big reflection. I think honestly, one of the reasons that I wanted to be a good dad was because I sort of wanted to like show up my dad, like, oh, you
Yeah.
kind of let me down. I think that was a motivating factor at the beginning.
Mm,
And what's interesting is the shift that happened was instead of feeling that way once I did it, it really made me reflect with a lot more empathy towards my dad.
mm,
I remember thinking very early on, sort of holding my son, and I don't even know what precipitated it, but thinking, I can't imagine what in the world would take me away from this baby, right?
yeah.
There is nothing in the world that I could imagine happening that would say, yeah, you're just going to leave him and never see what happens. Like that sounded like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And kind of that I was angry at my dad for like a split second about that. But then really what it opened up was, his mental health must have been really bad if his brain twisted this around to somehow come up with a justification for this, to somehow make this seem like this was the best option, because I
Mm,
literally cannot fathom how that would be the conclusion I would draw in this circumstance.
mm,
So it really, I think it started from a place of I can do this better than my dad, but it really took me to, wow, he must have really been struggling if that's the conclusion he came to,
mm.
and gave me a lot more, I'll say, appreciation for the sadness and the difficulty he must have been going through.
Yeah. And that happened a day after Father's Day, you mentioned?
Yeah, so my father took his own life basically the Monday after Father's Day in the US, which is on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And
And you were 11 at the
I was
time.
11 years old, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us about a few years leading up to that? How was he looking back now as a dad and as a grown up? Did you notice anything that was out of the ordinary?
I definitely didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at the time, but
Mm,
part of that I don't think I noticed much of anything at the
yeah.
time.
Yeah, because
So
you're a kid.
I was, but
Yeah.
I don't even think I was a particularly observant or outwardly focused kid. And so, looking back, we had an incident where our house actually burned down when I was 8 years old.
Oh.
And it's kind of an electrician did something that really wasn't supposed to, but my parents really urged him to do it because it was making our life difficult the way that it was. It
Mm,
started a fire. It was a very unsafe, we were sort of the classic, way too much money and not nearly enough brains type family. I mean, it's almost comical to look back at some of the decisions that were made in and around my family. And again, that's sort of a red flag. Things were not going well. We weren't really operating from a place of, I'll say, functional communication and family at the time. And I remember asking my mom, my dad, I don't have a lot of memories of time spent with him because he worked a lot, but I do remember he was usually the one who took me to like soccer games on Saturday mornings. And he would go and set up a blanket and read a book, and I would go play soccer. He didn't really pay attention to the game. He didn't at the end say, I don't remember him ever noticing anything I did in the game, but he was always there. And I
mm,
remember asking my mom one time, even before he died, how come dad just sits and reads? And she just looked at me and said, he's doing the best he can. And at the time, it didn't mean anything to me. I thought, well,
mm.
he's sitting and reading on a blanket. What is that? But,
Yeah.
that was kind of my mom didn't tell me the whole story, but she was sharing little bits of it that she could, which was it was really hard for him to do anything. And so this was what he could manage. And again, I was at the time felt very sort of ignored. But
Mm.
looking back again, this is just, I think, another sign of the struggle that was going on.
Yeah. Okay. When did you start to have that in-depth conversation with your mum about your dad's mental health and what happened to him?
Um, I think it was probably maybe a year or two after he died.
Oh, okay.
I
So
would
you're
say
still, I mean, you're still 12 then, 13.
yeah. Well, it became clear that it became clear that it was going to have a big impact. And I asked a lot of questions right away, and I don't think I got particularly good answers, but I don't think I was in any condition to really get answers. By the time I was 13, I was pretty depressed. I was seeing a therapist, and the idea was essentially, well, of course he's depressed. His dad died. His dad took his own life. His dad was depressed. It's not surprising. And I think what's interesting looking back now is I bet that I would have been that way anyway. I bet that I would have been depressed, or maybe I even was depressed before. I just didn't feel it. I didn't show it. Um, and so kind of my teenage years were really focused on processing my dad's death, which was obviously a necessary thing. But I also think what it missed was I was probably depressed anyway. And
Mm.
this was just the excuse we gave it, right? This was the reason behind it. But I think the reason behind it was even deeper than that. I think that was just a natural part of me and my sort of growing up. So, as part of the processing my dad's death, there were a lot more conversations with my mom. And obviously, she was going through a very rough time as well. I mean, dealing with it, feeling very, again, one of the things that they always tell you when a family member takes their own life is it's not your fault. It's not personal. You didn't cause this. And my mom and I are one of the, traits that I got from her definitely, but she has way more than I are sort of the taking it on yourself. I think she
Yeah.
felt very responsible. I felt very responsible. As you mentioned, it happened right after Father's Day. So I had this story in my head of, well, maybe I didn't celebrate it enough. Maybe I wasn't a good enough son.
Mm.
That was a very it wasn't that those stories, I would have told that story no matter what. It was just a
Mm.
question of how filling in the details to make it seem plausible to me. And my mom was doing the exact same thing. And there were people in our lives who were very happy with that narrative. My grandfather always blamed my mother for my dad dying. Even, I mean, he
Mm.
told me that again very late in his life. I thought to
Mm.
myself, that's so sad. I mean,
Mm.
why would you?
Yeah.
But I think the difference was he didn't have any of the emotional processing or language to take on any piece of it himself.
Yeah.
And so the idea that we could pass this on to somebody else, and there was somebody else who was kind of willingly taking it, right? Was raising their
Mm.
hand saying, yeah, this was definitely my fault. That was an easy out for him. But it
Yeah.
was a tough
It
model for
works.
me.
Mm.
Yeah, and it was
Mm.
a tough model for me to see my mom really taking this on so personally. My reaction was, well, it's got to be partially my fault too.
Yeah. Because you want to lessen that burden for her, I guess, in one
Yeah,
way.
right. Yeah,
Was she
definitely.
able to go through that process and maybe adopt a different mindset?
Yeah. Eventually she was a little slower on it than I was, I think. I
Yeah.
beat her to that one. But that was really, kind of your question was about when did we start talking about it? I'd say when 12 or 13 was when I really started asking questions. Well, how long had he been like this? And what led up to this? And
Mm.
that was when I started to understand, he's really probably been depressed since he was a teenager also. And
Yeah.
obviously this was the 80s, early 1990s. Our understanding of mental health, our understanding of treatments for depression, our understanding of medication for these
It's
things
very
were
different. Yeah.
very different and very kind of rudimentary at the time compared to
Yeah.
today.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting because one of the feedback that your colleagues have mentioned about you was that Alex is somebody with very high IQ, but even higher EQ. And so, what part of your childhood journey have contributed to this? Do you think it's something that you learned around that time?
Yeah, so this is an interesting aspect of it. I When I read the sort of, EQ book by Daniel Coleman, the sort of classic, this describing it, it really explained so much to me because at that time I'd been working at this big corporation for probably around 4 or 5 years when I happened to come across this book, and I didn't understand it at all because I really liked I mentioned I got into aerospace engineering because I liked math and physics and I was good at that, but everybody there was good at it. I didn't stand out in that, but I was very able to convince people to do things. If I thought a project should go a certain way, I'd say, oh, we should do it this way. And people would always listen. And if I thought we should really allocate some budget to go do this project, people would give me money to do it. And I didn't understand that. And then I read this book and it kind of talked about, well, IQ is important, but your ability to read other people, your ability to empathize, your ability to understand their point of view. And, somebody said, well, we have these research and development budget meetings. Nobody ever gets any money, so it's not worth going to. And I went in and they gave me like a $1.5 million budget to go off and build this. And I thought, what do you mean nobody? This was a piece of cake. And he said, well, how did you do that? And I said, well, I went in and I thought about the three people who make the decision and what was important to them. And my presentation was, 1/3 was this is why it's important to you, to you, to you. And everybody else just went in and talked about why the thing that they wanted to build was cool, right?
Yeah.
Why they thought it was cool. And
Yeah.
I went in and explained, no, this is why you want it and this is why you
Yeah.
want it. And I didn't even mention why I thought it was cool. I just left that out of the presentation completely. But this was the idea of, oh, it turns out that as an aerospace engineer, having high empathy and being able to look into other people's brains and really understand what motivates them, what emotions are they feeling, how do they do, that was the different piece. And that's really, again, talking about my career journey. When I decided to become a manager, it was really saying, I should just lean into that because actually that's the thing that sets me aside. Everyone here knows how to write computer codes to design airplanes. It's a really cool skill, but I don't stand out in that. What I stand out is I can convince people of things and I can help people process things. And that's really what I should be doing.
Yeah.
The part about where did that come from, I think I had a very natural sensitivity to that. But I don't think I tapped into it at all in the slightest until I really went into therapy and started processing what happened with my dad and reliving kind of a lot of my own childhood and trying to understand his life and go back through it, really with a fine-tooth comb and understand why did these things happen and why did these things hurt so much and why do people do things and why do I do things? And I really, that was really kind of from age 11 probably until about 23. I wasn't a great person. I did a lot of things looking back that I really regret, and it was because I was very hurt and I was trying to understand it. And I'm very fortunate that at my core, I have a natural capability for empathy that essentially I think I spent a lot of time honing that and working that out in that time. And that hurt. It was really hard and painful. But when I got through it, it sort of emerged as, oh, this is really the thing that all the people in my particular corner of my career don't have, or certainly don't have as much as I do.
How long did it take you to go through that hurt, to even uncover and to acknowledge that the hurt is there, to live through it and go out the other side?
I think it was probably through about age 18 was maybe the turning point, and then going off to college was sort of a reset. And I think I purposefully reset in a very different way, and that again gave me another opportunity to look back and understand I wasn't with the people that I really wanted to spend time with in high school. And I have great friends and great memories, but the friends that I made in college were very different. And then going to grad school kind of was another round of, oh, these people are even more like me. And that was really where I met other people who were in engineering, but also did have empathy, did care about relationships, did, have that.
Yeah.
And kind of each stage I met more and more people like that and found more people that made me feel at home and comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. Did being a dad further enhances that empathy for you? Because one of the things that I learned was you become so attuned to what the babies need, right? And at the time they're so little, they can't even communicate with you. They don't even know what they need, but you needed to go through, okay, maybe they are hungry at the time, or maybe they need to sleep. And the terrible twos came in and you need to really empathize with their own ego as well as what they need. Has that changed how you are as a person and how you empathize with others?
Yes, although I don't think it happened right at first.
Yeah.
I think if anything, probably initially I maybe overdid it, or it was in competition with another piece of me that needed control. And
Yeah.
there was sort of I had a big anxiety
Yeah.
around, a lot of these things, especially because the part of I, on the one hand, going through, the loss of my dad taught me I can survive anything, that there is no emotional hurt that I can't make it through. um, but then the flip side was I really never want to go through that again. And so the anxiety of I want to control this, I want to keep people that I care about safe, things like that,
Mm.
really ratcheted up, I think, with my first son. And it was a combination of wanting to control everything, wanting things to go just so to kind of keep my anxiety at bay. And the empathy even allowed me to do that. So our first son was like a super easy baby. And it's because he's just like me, which is to say that the inputs and outputs were very consistent. If you did the same thing every day, he had the same reaction. So once we figured out, it would be impossible. He would be upset about everything. And then we'd figure out, oh, this is what he needs at this time every day. And then it was no problem. So he sleep trained, he was sleeping 6 hours when he was 4 months. I mean, just,
What?
all of these things that, people warned us about.
Yeah.
Potty training was like literally a weekend and he was done. It was just such easy things. And we were like, oh, we are awesome at this, right?
Yeah.
I was controlling everything and I was able to do that.
Yeah.
My wife and I are both very smart, but also have empathy and we could kind of figure it out. And once we figured out the patterns, he was very, clear about, yes, you figured out the pattern, keep doing this.
Mm.
We had our second son, of course, this is how the story always goes, right? And we thought this is going to be no problem. We know what we're doing. And it was not that at all. None of the things that we did with the first one
Yeah.
worked. And, that was my wife had to sit down and say, you're getting frustrated because you expect the same inputs every day to cause the same outputs. And she said,
Yeah.
with our first, that happened to be the case, but that's not actually how humans work. You're gonna
Yeah.
need to let go. So I think it was really the second son, and then understanding, okay, I need to let go. I need to gain better control of my anxiety. I'd done a lot of work to get rid of depression, but then I still had a lot of anxiety, and the anxiety had been very useful. It had been something that had helped me a lot in my career. I was able to control huge amounts of things, and that was really what my brain really focused on doing. That was its natural state. And now with kids, it was completely the wrong thing to do, and so I had to learn, the empathy and emotional intelligence was there, but again, I think I had to hone it to, I really need to let go. I need to let these people be their own people. And the anxiety therapist I saw who really helped me with this, he again he said, you know, I think the question I asked was, how do I get my son to do the things I want when I want him to do, Like I want him to explain, like, what's the magic to getting this? I think my son was 4 or 5 at the time, right?
Oh
And his,
dear. Yeah.
yeah, and his response was, 100%
Never.
perfect, which was, why does it have to be your way? Right?
Yeah.
What about it? Why can't you just accept that he wants to do it his way? And I said, well, I'm the parent. I have to be in charge. And he said, well, just try it. Try just accepting that he's his own person and he has his own approach and his own ideas. And just see what happens. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, fine, but that's never going to work. And I had there's like within a few days, we were trying to go to the park and okay, you got to stop. You got to put on your shoes. My son looked at me and said, no, we're going to the park. Don't you want to go to the park? No. I said, put on your shoes. And I said, okay, fine. We'll try this crazy idea. And I said, okay, if you don't want to put on your shoes, that's fine. We'll just wait. It's okay. And he looked at me and he said, okay, I'll put on my shoes now. Put on his shoes and walked out to the car. And I was like, what is this magic? Right? And the truth was that my son was, he was fighting back against all of the control that I'd been
Yeah.
pushing for so long. And
Yeah.
just as soon as I pulled back, I made it clear what I wanted to have happen. But I also
Yeah.
said, look, it doesn't have to go my way. If you don't want to go to the park, we'll just sit here and look at your shoes. And he
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay, fine, let's go to the park then. But that idea of, okay, now you need to let go. So that's when I think back of how did empathy affect me as a parent? It was really, empathy was good, but it was acceptance. Once I got acceptance, then the empathy became useful as a parent. Before that, it was really overridden by control and anxiety. And I had to
Yeah.
learn to let go of those before I could really use those skills again in parenting.
Yeah. That is wonderful. Thanks for sharing. So, true. And tell us a little bit more about the twins.
Yeah, so we had 2 boys. This is where the cautionary tale when we tell the story to people who couples we just meet, especially when they have 2 kids. Like, this is the part where they look at each other with kind of the big eyes of like, oh, we had 2 boys. My wife
Yeah.
always wanted a girl. She told me, if we have a girl, I'm going to name her this. Before we were even married, I'm pretty sure we had that conversation. And I was like, cool, great. Love that name. It's perfect. So wanted to have a girl. Said, okay, well, things are going pretty well with two. Let's try for a third. Try for a third. Two more boys. We get it, universe. The message is sent. The funny part of this, I mean, I remember these moments of sort of like just brutal clarity, sitting in, getting the ultrasound, and the doctor saying, well, this is going to be a little bit of a different pregnancy. And, well, okay, that doesn't sound good. And she said, there's two babies in there. And because my wife is a twin. And so we had joked about, oh, maybe we'll have twins
Yeah.
all the time. Like, even before we had kids, oh, maybe. And then my wife just goes, oh, we shouldn't have joked about it so much. But yeah, so we had to adapt to that. So they were born in October of 2019. They were 5 months old.
Wow.
We were lining up daycares, trying to figure out where are we going to send these kids in March of 2020, and then they all just closed. There was nowhere to go. So we had a month where my wife and I worked 2 full-time jobs. We watched 2 kids who were doing remote learning. One of them was 4, so I mean, remote learning isn't even a fair name for what he was doing. And then we had 2 2-year-olds running around, and we had no help. We didn't have anyone from the outside coming in. It was just us in the house. And, feel like, oh, what was that like? And I was like, beats me. Like, we don't remember any of it. My wife and I were sleeping like 3 hours a night. We basically didn't speak. Everything was just operational survival.
Yeah.
And so, we were actually kind of fortunate because they were only 6 months old. So the twins at least didn't move yet too much. One of them started, and we were kind of like, take it easy, buddy.
And how old was
So
the first one then?
he was, oh, that's a good question. So he was 6 or 7. Yeah, 7. He just turned 7.
7,
And then,
4, and
yeah,
6 months old. Oh
yeah,
my
right.
goodness.
Yeah. So
And
I mean,
full-time jobs each. That's
right.
crazy.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, we hired a nanny. She came in and, she watched the twins. She helped us with, help the older ones as they kind of had to do online learning in school and stuff like that. It was great. But it was like, I can't tell you what the experience of having twins is, because it was, from then on, it was the experience of the pandemic. The twins were sort of
Yeah.
inconsequential to the
Yeah.
situation. I will say that it gave me a huge appreciation for parents who have twins as their first and or only kids,
Yeah.
because it was hard. It was really hard, but we knew a lot of stuff. I knew how to change a diaper. I knew how to put a baby to sleep. I knew how, and I said we had one who was really easy. Then we had the second one who we call him the wild card. You never know. You give him the same meal 2 days in a row. One day he eats it. One day he's like, I actually don't like this. Like, that's the same thing we gave you yesterday. He's still that way. He's 8 years old. It's fine. That's just who he is. We love him. But
Yeah.
each of the twins, they were nothing alike, but they were each like one of their older brothers. So this time we were like, we've got the patterns now. So we actually knew what to do, because we were like, well, you're like this one, we have to do this. Oh, you're like this one, we have to do this. And so even though we had twins, we were really lucky because we'd kind of already had a dry run with each one of those options, to kind of know what to look out for and how to handle it. And we were, like I said, we were really lucky from that standpoint, even though it was 4 kids. When people ask, oh, how's that? I mean, for us, actually going from 1 to 2 was harder than going 2 to 4 and the pandemic. We struggled so much more with our second kid because we thought we knew what we were doing. We thought that everything was under control. We thought that we could handle it, and none of that was true. We had to rebuild everything when our second kid didn't follow any of the patterns that we thought we knew. And all of a sudden, there was a 2-year-old also who had opinions and thoughts, and, was very, very precocious and verbal and telling us all the things that he didn't like about what was happening. And yeah, so going from 2 to 4, we were kind of like, well, we've got the systems, we know what to do, we just got to keep going. And we sort
Double
of,
up. Yeah.
and all the expectations were gone. I think that was the other part of twins, is that we never
Yeah.
thought, oh, this is going to be optimal, oh, this is going to be great. We thought this is going to be a dumpster fire, but that's okay, we just got to get through every day.
It's like that meme of the dog in the
Yeah, right.
burning.
Exactly.
Home.
Yeah, that was,
This is totally fine.
yes, that was definitely like March of 2020. That was us in spades. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So how old were the boys when you decided to be the lead parent, and how long were you doing that for?
So the twins were 2 and maybe a half or so. So my oldest was in second grade. He was 8 or maybe turning 9.
Yep.
And then yeah, so and then the other one was in first
11.
grade.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, so 9 and 6 probably.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then the twins were 2. And
Yep.
um we knew that, oh, it'll be a little bit of a change for the older ones, especially the second one had never gone to school kind of in person. He'd gone hybrid for the end of the year before, but like now we were going back in the fall, and it was going to be, real go to school every day. Like, okay, well, it's going to be a little bit of a shift. And we knew that the 2-year-olds, one of them didn't talk like at all. He really only said daddy, and the was like could have meant anything
Anything.
in the world. And it was one of those things where I knew that I was partially responsible because I always knew what he wanted. Like, made perfect sense to me in every context. But we knew that he really needed to get out and be exposed to other people and see other kids and learn to communicate. Like so many other things, when you say, I wish my kid would do X, then he doesn't, and you're like, oh, why did we push for that? But anyway, that's a different story. um, so we knew that we had to get them out, but also we knew that like the COVID protocols meant that every time they got sick, it was going to be days of them being home and tests, and they would never, they'd been to playgrounds like a handful of times in their life. They'd never been around other kids. So we knew that they were going to get sick all the time. And that was the main reason. The thinking was, yeah, this is going to be tough because it's, having 2 full-time jobs, someone's going to be taking off a day every other week. And
Mm,
it's just going to be a nightmare. So
mm,
let's just get through kind of the first 6 months of that with one parent who's just ready, when okay, this
mm.
kid can't go to school, fine. I didn't have anything else to do today anyway, instead of what it was during the pandemic of, my wife and I getting out our calendars and, okay, I can do 9 to 10. Okay, well, I have this meeting, but I can probably hold a baby during, those types of discussions, which again, we managed, but we kind of looked around and said, this is not the life. We need to put an end to this, right? We need to stop this pattern. This emergency is over for us. So,
Mm.
um, and
And
that was
how
right. I
did that
mean,
discussion go with your wife? Did you make a decision
oh,
based on,
yeah.
well, I've given birth, I stayed at home, so it's now your turn, or is it the financial metrics, or is it the, yeah, what happened
Yeah.
then?
No, it was a very easy conversation. Um, my wife is a fantastic mother, and she says willingly, I love my kids, and I love them even more when I've been away from them all day. That is, she is not the I don't think she's ever felt conflicted internally to I should stay at home, um, anything like that. My company went out of business, and so that was really, it was not just sort of 2 jobs, but it was going to be me starting a new job, which
Oh,
was
nice.
going to have a whole,
I
that
mean,
that was
yep,
it was good timing from that
yep,
standpoint. It made it
yep.
easy for us to make the decision. From a financial standpoint, it was not a good one. I made more money than my wife, but my wife's job is running clinical trials on late stage pediatric cancers at Stanford, and
Oh,
helping design those. So
okay.
her job is like literally saving kids' lives.
Yep.
And on the balance of, yeah, we'll make less money, but kind of what does the world need more? Does it need more cool
Okay.
airplanes, or does it need somebody with her kind of unique skills to help save the kids? That was sort of a no-brainer. And she
Yep.
also always got more fulfillment from her job than I did. I think she really loves her job and loves that it helps people and loves that the things that, her PhD is in chemical and systems biology, but it has this very sort of clear application of how she uses her knowledge and her background in science. And so it really it wasn't a conversation about, oh, I'm going to show the men what it should be, or, oh, this
Mm,
is what makes sense. It was really just, you love your job and I don't have one. So this is kind of what makes sense. And she was like, yeah, I agree. I said, yeah, from a financial standpoint, we'll just have to make it work. And she said, yeah, I agree. So it was, it kind of fell into us. I don't, it was fortunate in that I think it was the right shift for us, but it
mm.
didn't require any, the transition was made externally. We didn't have to decide anything on our own. So
Yeah,
we were lucky from that standpoint.
that's awesome. Sounds like you just make the best out of anything that the world throws at you.
Well, and I think that's, again, if you had told me back, 2 weeks before my first son was born, when I had this ultra stable corporate job, in 10 years, you will have worked for a startup, it will go out of business, you will have been an executive, and then you'll be a stay-at-home dad, I would have said, there's no way any of that is true. I
Yeah.
literally could not believe that.
Yeah.
And then as they came along, it was just, I think, again, I looked at my kids and I thought, what can I do that's the best for everybody, right? Not just what's my career success look like, but what does our family success, what does our
Mm.
family ambition look like?
Mm.
Um, and so that made those decisions easy. And I think, again, for me, the decisions were always easy. The sort of identity fallout came later in all of them and had required processing and required
Yeah.
mulling over and contemplation and
Yeah.
acceptance. But it came in all those cases. It was just the decision of the rational decision was the easy part in a lot of them.
Yeah. Perfect. So how long were you stay-at-home dad for?
It was about, I guess, probably a year and a half.
Yeah.
Um, so that story is after about 6 months, we thought, okay, things are kind of settled. The people are back out. I think I counted that I had watched a kid at home for something like, 42 days in that time period. So we would have needed 42 sick days somehow to have bridged that gap. So me not working was the right thing. And thought, okay, well, I think I'll, maybe it's time to start looking, find a job. And my older son started struggling a lot. And he really we didn't see it coming. Uh, I think he'd always been an anxious kid. He'd been in therapy for that. And all of a sudden, depression came on. And he sort of got into a vein of, I don't really know what the point of living is. I don't know
Oh, wow.
why I should get out of bed. And he was 9. And
Yeah.
so when 9-year-olds have these thoughts, it's pretty serious because older kids can understand sort of the limits of human bodies. And so they can, when they self-harm, usually if it's for attention or something like that, I mean, it's always a bad situation. I don't want to minimize it, but
Mm. Mm.
they are much more understanding of this would actually kill me or this will not.
Yeah.
9 to like 11, 12-year-olds really don't have that sense, especially boys. So
Yeah.
it's very serious when they start talking about things like that.
Mm.
And that really kind of set off the decision of, no, it's not time for me to add more stress and anxiety. If the trade-off
Yeah.
is money or being there for my son, we'll have to deal with the money later. We can always
Yeah.
make more money, but especially having been through the experience with my dad and my own depression, to see it in my son was really difficult. And he got to the point where, he was sent home from school. He had days where he was basically just couldn't get out of bed. And again, just kind of needed a parent who could drop everything and be there. And so it went on longer and the plan changed again. And eventually it became clear that things got much better. Um, we kind of got the diagnosis and medications that really figured out what he needed.
Mm.
Um, and he's in a much better place now. But it became clear that this was not going to be something that was going to magically turn around and all of a sudden, us working 50 hours a week each was going to be in the cards for us. So that was really the point at which I said, okay, well, I have been doing a little bit of consulting in aerospace, stuff like that. And honestly, I don't miss it. I don't miss that job. I don't really want another job like that. But let's see if I can make money. So that was really kind of when I leaned into the emotional intelligence. I got a certification to be an emotional intelligence coach and, give a certain type of assessment that I could coach around, and started just, built my own business and said, okay, well, how can I help parents? What can I do to help them from the things that I've learned? And can I make a business out of that will fit in and around the needs of being a parent, in and around the family needs that I can kind of control and guide.
Mm. Perfect. I hope your son is okay now, your firstborn. He's on track,
Yeah. So,
or
yeah,
it's
I think
always a
that,
daily practice. I like anything, I suppose, but at least you
yeah,
know what you're dealing with.
it was a very rocky about 18 months from the point at which it first onset,
Mm.
of, just really every day being like, we don't know what it's going to hold. We'd send him off to school and we'd immediately kind of text to the counselor at school and been like, he's having a tough day. We got him to go, we got him to come, but it is what it is. Let us know.
Mm.
And there were plenty of days where an hour later she texts, yeah, he can't do it. We gotta bring him home, or you need to come down here in some cases. So and we are so fortunate. The area we live in, it's very understanding. They were completely supportive. There were great resources provided through the school system for him. And I mean, even that was really rocky for us. And I look at us and I think we have two parents who both understand mental health challenges very well. My wife's mother was a social worker, so she grew up in that environment, understanding therapy, things like that. We have very, very good resources. We're in a part of the world that understands this, and we struggled for 18 months. The families that go through this without, a fraction of this support, my heart breaks for them, because it was so hard for us, and we were like the most prepared you could be for it. Um, Ultimately, he was diagnosed as bipolar, and a psychiatrist picked that out. A psychiatrist who'd only ever met him through Zoom meetings picked that out because of his reaction to a certain medication. She said, well, that would be consistent with bipolar. And you mentioned that you may have had that in your family. So let's try this meds. And it was like 3 months. He went from, we don't know how every day is going to go, to this is our son again. He's back. And not that it was easy, not that he still doesn't struggle with kind of big emotions, but the pieces of, I don't really want to live, I can't get through the day, all of those, they went away. And so that diagnosis and that determination was crucial for us. And again, I look around, I was really mad at first because I thought, why did we go through 18 months of this before somebody figured it out? And then in learning more about bipolar disorder, how it manifests in kids, how it's diagnosed, I determined actually we were insanely lucky that our psychiatrist managed to pick that out and come up with that, with the data that she had, that many, many people would have struggled for years before trying this or uncovering this. So again, kind of in the families that are dealing with this and don't have the best resources and the best people and things like that, it's just such a hard battle. And we are so fortunate we got the help that we did in the way that we did.
Yeah, and he's so fortunate that you're able to spend your focus on your family at the time as well. It could have been delayed a lot more had you been distracted with work challenges. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about your project right now? You're helping parents find the career that they want.
Right. So kind of in coming out and making this business, I tried a couple different angles, but really, I had friends who came to me, one of them, and she said, that feeling that you had when I know that you worked at this company and you kind of looked around and said, well, this isn't the right job for me, even though I thought it was. She said, she had a young, maybe a 9-month-old baby, her first baby. And she said, that's exactly how I feel. What did you coach me on the things that you wish you had done then, right? What have you learned in this past decade that you wish you knew to do then? And then how do you get out of it? And I said, oh, actually, that's really easy. Like, I know exactly what I would do now. So that was kind of what started this, and then started talking to other parents, started reaching out. So, the idea is essentially that feeling of my job doesn't suit me anymore because I need a different type of flexibility. I need to care about it. And it turns out I don't. And I didn't realize that was important. Or, what I thought was the career that I wanted doesn't fit my life. In a lot of cases, parents I talk to is because they have a son or a child who is struggling with mental health or, other diagnoses or other special needs. And it's kind of like, my job doesn't support me in this. I need something else. But now I understand the bounds of what that can be, and I want to go find the right thing for that. And so in that way, it's a combination of helping people understand what really gives them that purpose, what makes them excited to work, because then they can really put themselves into it. You're already excited to be a parent, I hope, and so you're putting yourself into that, but you need something else that complements it. And then the other piece that I kind of alluded to is using your skills, but the things that are actually easy for you to do, right? Lean into the strengths that you have so that work feels impactful, but it doesn't require you to do the hard things because you're already doing the hard things at home. Find something that, oh, well, this is actually, everyone thinks this is really hard, but this is easy for me. Well, that's the perfect job for a parent, right? Because then you're super
Yeah.
valuable, you're super impactful, but it doesn't take a lot out of you. And I think that there's a lot of people who don't. I certainly was very lucky that I, sort of wandered into this, but taking that time to figure those things out can have such a big impact on how you are a parent, because now you come home excited, you come home energized, you come home, as opposed to being drained, being run ragged, being beaten down, being stressed out. And it turns out it's a lot easier to build boundaries when you feel confident at your job, when you feel that your job is purposeful, when you understand it. And those boundaries, again, every parent needs to know how to make those. You need to understand how to say, I have to put my phone down from this time to this time. And part of it is just finding the right work environment. Like I said, at the startup, all the other people I worked with were the same age, had kids roughly the same age. So we all got it. If somebody said, oh, my kid's sick, I can't make this meeting, we all were like, oh yeah, no problem, I'll cover for you, right? And if you can't parent out loud like that, if you can't say, oh, I have to leave at 3 today to get this, can we do this meeting tomorrow, because you're afraid of what people are going to say, it just makes your life so hard.
Yeah.
And so I think more and more of those environments are popping up, and those places are becoming welcoming to parents. But if you became a parent at your job, it may not be the right one. So that's really the focus, is kind of helping to get parents into those spots where now they can use their unique skills and parent the way that they want to and feel good about it, and kind of help industries, right? Help the workplace recognize, like, you can have really good talent if you understand how to be accepting of caregivers, right? Not just parents, but people who are taking care of their parents, sandwich generation, all of this. There's a big opportunity here. And so I think I found it very fulfilling to help the parents shuffle into those positions and find ways to get to that, from my job is not right for me, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Awesome. So how do you help them? One-on-one coaching? Do you have group session? Is it delivered virtually?
Yeah, so right now it's virtual coaching. I have a program that goes through kind of three major steps. One is around your purpose at work. One is around kind of the emotional intelligence piece of what are your natural tendencies, what are your triggers, what are the things that you'll do well at. And then one piece around identity, talking about kind of how do you, especially for new parents, how do you fit in that identity piece to what you need it to be, right? How do you get everything in balance the way you want it? And then putting all that together, so it's all one-on-one coaching. I'm looking actually to sort of expand it into a group coaching program that's a little bit more expansive and follows up with, okay, now you've figured out the jobs you want. How do you find the job recs? How do you apply for the job? How do you make a resume? How do you do the interview? Because I think, again, for me, I'm a people pleaser. It would be really hard for me to walk into an interview and say, look, I'm a working parent and I need this flexibility. But the truth is that if you can't say that in the job interview, the chances you end up with a job that gives you the flexibility you need is very low. Right? It would just be luck. And right now, from what I understand of workplaces, the probabilities are not in your favor. So how do you get comfortable with saying what you need, right? Just believing that if I say what I need and I don't get this job, this just wasn't the right job for me. Not there's something wrong with me,
Yeah.
not I need to change, I need to be whatever this job needs. I mean, there are certainly people out there who are fighting tooth and nail to find whatever job they can to put food on their table. I understand that. But I think that there's also a big portion of people who are stuck in ways that they don't need to be, and they just haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. Or know how to set the boundary, as you mentioned before.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes back to, if you're going for the job, you can go in confident and say, I love the mission of this company. Here are my skills and what I'll bring to it. And it's really important to me that I have the flexibility to care about my family, because that's important to me too. And if the other people look at you like you have three heads and they shuffle you out the door, it's terrible, but that's not your job. And if they go, oh yeah, no, half the group has, little kids and I have a 3-year-old, so I totally get it, then you've kind of found your people, right? And then everything is, it's all going to spiral upward from there.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you work with corporation as well and industry?
I haven't done any of that yet. I've really focused on
Okay.
kind of the individuals, but
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
certainly be open to that.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to bridge that gap, because especially working moms, it's probably something that is a little bit more accepted, but working dads, as you mentioned before, there's such a huge stigma with stay-at-home dads. Um, Like when you were saying, you used to be an S2 engineer, but being a stay-at-home dad is a lot of work as well, especially to
Yeah.
four boys, right? So it shouldn't be seen as something that is inferior, to be honest. And
Hmm.
if corporation and industry can appreciate that and bridge the gap, but then allow talented people to still work in the capacity that also works for their family, I think that'll be a win-win for everyone.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. I want to go back to the young Alex,
Okay.
the 11-year-old, who have just experienced a huge shift and a huge loss in his life. Knowing all of the wealth of knowledge that you know now, anything around mental health issues, your experience with your son, your experience with yourself, what one advice would you give the young Alex?
I only get one, huh? I think it would be, well, what I jump to first is it's not your fault. Um, and I think the it in that sentence is very expansive. I think 11-year-old Alex would have taken it as, your dad's death, but I think the it actually needs to be a little bit bigger, that your mental health is not your fault. Your mother's mental health is not your fault. Your father's mental health is not your fault. The way that you behave is you're a product of all of these things that have come together. And it's not not bad. There's nothing wrong with you. And there's plenty of time for you to sort it out. Because I think what 11-year-old me felt was, I'm broken. I'll always be broken. This was all my fault, and I deserve the bad things that happened to me. Um, and that was really, I think that was the piece that was the hardest to break free from as I worked through all of the grief and depression and all the different pieces.
Right. Thanks, Alex. And one last question that I always ask all guests is, do you have an Alpha Dad song?
I was thinking about that. So I think probably my pick would be Pearl Jam
Oh
Release.
yeah.
So it is Oh Dear Dad, Can You See Me Now, right? It's kind of it's the lead singer it's a song to his dad about, can you see how far I've come?
Mm.
And I think that's I always loved that song. Pearl Jam's one of my favorite bands, and that one in particular, whenever I hear it, I sort of imagine that same conversation with my dad.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing with us your journey with such candor and such um, positivity, despite of everything that's happened in your life. Just one last thing to impart all of our listeners. For parents who are dealing with mental health issues in their life, either with themselves or especially with their kids, what one advice could you give the parents that are listening right now?
Yeah, that is definitely the one about acceptance. Um, that is, similarly as what I told my 11-year-old self, it's not your fault, but also understand that nobody is doing this on purpose. And it is really up to you to accept yourself for who you are, with all of the challenges and all of the benefits and all of the things that come from it that are good and bad and indifferent. And the same with your child. And what will help more than anything is just meeting them where they are and making them feel like you'll be there no matter what. Um, I think one of the great statements I see a lot of around this is, it's not about fixing your kids, right? Mental health is about support. It's about giving them the tools to figure out how they can live their life with this. It's not about fixing it, because it's not like there's anything wrong. They're not broken. They're not doing this on purpose, right? And they didn't, I know my wife and I really struggled with this piece, which was, how can you be so depressed? Nothing bad has happened to you. That's not how it works, right? You just have to accept this is how their brain works in whatever way it is. And every kid has things like that need that acceptance. Mental health is one of the harder ones, because it can be so painful and so scary. But at the end of the day, it really is about accepting this is who they are. I'm going to love them no matter what, and I'm going to support them whatever it takes. That was the piece. Once my wife and I got to that, even though the days were scary and hard with our son, we kind of knew we were gonna make it through the day. We felt much better about, we're doing what we can, and this is how it goes.
Perfect. All right, Alex, thank you so much for that. And
Yeah.
I hope to see you in person one day. I'll let you know when I travel up to the States.
That would be
And
great. Yeah.
likewise to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. See you then.
This episode of the Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of Darug people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.